I remarked a while back that I didn't really have much more to say about Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, but it turns out that I do have one more observation to make while we wait in the lull before Engage becomes the hot new thing. That being, that whatever else you might say about 3 Hopes' story and characters, its gameplay is fairly solid, and more importantly for me at least, it's also accessible to people who may not be familiar with Warriors games. Considering how heavily 3 Hopes relies on you having played 3 Houses, a point-and-click grid-based tactical game, that accessibility was probably a major concern during development, to ensure that people like me would still play the game and also write long-winded video essays about it, even though the actual experience of playing it isn't exactly what we're used to. To that end, I wanted to come up with a video acknowledging my favorite movesets from 3 Hopes, the ones that were the easiest to use and that I had the most fun playing. There are around 20 movesets in this game, depending on how you count them, so let's go with the top 5. This list is not about the best movesets in 3 Hopes, because I'm not good enough of a player to make a judgment like that, but I do think that the movesets that I enjoyed more tend to be, not surprisingly, the ones that also perform better, so you could take it that way if you prefer, at least from the perspective of a casual Warriors player. I'm well aware that I've never aimed to hit the skill ceilings of some of the more complicated movesets, so don't go into this expecting that I'm some kind of Warriors veteran. Additionally, I'm going to be evaluating these movesets independent of characters, so I won't be taking personal abilities into account. The exception, of course, will be for unique classes, because there's no way to not talk about the characters who can access them in those cases. So let's get started now with number 5. If we're talking about ease of use, there's no way I couldn't include Fluegel and Asura on this list. Shez's classes seem designed to be appealing to new players. You really feel that power up the first time you play through the prologue and unlock this moveset, and it's perfect for carrying your way through the game if you don't feel like experimenting with the class system, which is basically the whole point of giving a main character an intentionally overpowered class in the first place. It's fast, it hits hard, its combos and charge attack are all pretty useful, it's a hybrid class, meaning it can equip both combat arts and spells for added versatility, and in combination with Shez's personal ability and Shadow Slide, you can zip through the map faster than any other character. Shez is all around great at allowing you to feel strong and in control of the battlefield, and the main reason I rank their classes so low here is that they're so heavily telegraphed as overpowered. There's also, to be fair, a bit of an issue with the moveset sometimes being too quick for its own good, which can be a little disorienting sometimes. And in that regard, I actually have a slight preference for Byleth's unique classes, as they're similar in some respects, but feel a bit more grounded, and have some more variety to their combo effects. However, you're not going to get anywhere near as much mileage out of Silverheart and Enlightened One, because Byleth has some of the worst availability in this game, so it's Shez's classes that make it onto this list. Here's an underdog success story. Mortal Savant in 3 Houses is derided as one of the worst classes in that game, often with a certain sense of betrayal as such a cool concept ruined by bad speed and the limited value of hybrid classes and the variety of stronger options available. In 3 Hopes, though, Mortal Savant is a top-tier class, among the best in the game. Like all other sword masterclasses, it's a hybrid, which is always useful, and of the others in that group, it's the one that's the easiest to use. The Thief line has a more extreme version of the issue that Shez's classes have, in that they're sometimes too fast to keep up with, while Dancer is a more technically focused class that requires you to keep a steady rhythm in order to get the most out of it. They're cool ideas for classes, and I'm sure higher skilled players get a kick out of using them to their fullest potential, but Mortal Savant is equally as effective while being considerably more straightforward to use. There's still some finesse in learning how to use the class's combos to unleash different elemental effects, but personally I never bothered with that much, as compared to other classes with similar systems, I found it hard to pull out specific elements in the heat of battle. Fortunately, spells make up for that deficit quite well, and shy of the occasional unexpected monster fight, it never felt like a drawback. I should also point out that Rhea's Saint class belongs here as well, as it's nearly the same as Mortal Savant, but because it's locked to a character who can't be used outside the Record Keeper, that's not terribly noteworthy. In any case, good job, Mortal Savant. You're finally useful. Now this one was a surprise. Typically, I consider axe classes in Fire Emblem to be of the boring but practical variety, where they're consistently strong physical units, but also not terribly interesting. I was expecting Three Hopes to give me more of the same, so you can imagine how shocked I was to discover that one of the movesets that I found the most fun to play was the one used by Brigands and Warriors. Nothing really fancy here, but it works well for what it is, and some of its combos are entertainingly goofy. It also has a charge attack that's simple to understand and use, and can easily set up other combos or combat arts. There's also the matter of Wyvern Rider and Lord, which are in the same branch of this class tree. I share the commonly held opinion among many Three Hopes players that the flying movesets in this game aren't the best. Their hitboxes can be unusual, some of their combos lock them into disorienting maneuvers, and their sheer size on the screen can make them very awkward to play in close quarters. That said, however, one of the biggest advantages of the standard Wyvern classes is that when they dismount they get this moveset, which is really handy as it allows them to fly quickly from target to target on their mounts, and then hop off when they arrive and start cleaving their way through enemies. It's a bit embarrassing that Three Hopes makes more effective use of a Fire Emblem mechanic than its mainline counterpart does, but I'm not about to complain that the game encourages tactical use of dismounting like this. There's only one brawling moveset in Three Hopes, but fortunately it's a really solid one. Brawler, Grappler, and War Master boast rapid attack speed and the ability to easily chain together combat arts and other attacks, and War Master in particular is excellent at breaking through stronger enemies' guards. There's just something satisfying, too, about running around and punching everything to death, even if it's a playstyle that definitely works best on softer targets like mages. My only real gripe with this line of classes is that Brawler and Grappler have increased movement speed compared to other infantry units, like the Thief line, but War Master reverts to the standard movement speed, which feels like the only time in this game when promotion makes a unit noticeably worse in some way. I assume that this was done as a nod to Three Houses, where Grappler has superior movement to War Master in that it ignores terrain, but here it feels like a downgrade unless you find the faster movement of Brawler and Grappler harder to control, which I kind of do sometimes. Guess it's not such a drawback after all. Before I name my number one pick, I wanted to give a nod to a pair of honorable mentions. All of the house leaders' unique movesets are good, at least relative to the standard movesets they most resemble. Edelgard's is a much more offensively oriented improvement over the standard armored infantry, while Claude's combines two moveset types I'm not wild about, that being archers and flyers, into one that mostly functions fine. Also, his Wyvern can spit fireballs, which isn't terribly useful most of the time, but it's fun. Still, though, I think the real winner here is Dimitri, whose High Lord and Great Lord are just so delightfully silly. Watch him defy gravity as he twirls through the air and hovers in place while chucking lances at the ground. It's so dumb and over the top, and I'm absolutely here for it. It's exactly the sort of exaggerated power fantasy that Warriors combat is built for. I also wanted to give a nod to one of the tome movesets in this video, because I'm typically a fan of magic users in Fire Emblem games. Three Hopes makes them very hard to like, however. They're slow, they're floaty, their attacks have weird hitboxes, their charge attacks aren't very useful as they're either weak or require you to stand in one place, which isn't great, especially when you're squishy, and most of them can break out different elemental effects with their combos, although you'll have to memorize a table's worth of button inputs for each moveset to remember which combo does what. There's really not much the tome classes can do that any of the other classes that can equip spells can do better. And I'm naming Gremory as an honorable mention, not so much because it's significantly better than the others, but because the reduced cooldown on all spells leans into the primary advantage of these classes in a way that none of the hybrid classes can replicate. That's better than nothing, I suppose. With all that out of the way, it's time for my top spot. I love being able to say that Holy Knight is unironically a top-tier class in Three Hopes. I've always been a fan of this type of class fantasy in games, and all the more so in Fire Emblem because it's not actually that common in this franchise. But sadly, Holy Knight is one of the most forgettable classes in Three Houses. It's not even notoriously bad like Mortal Savant, it's just outclassed at everything it can do. The massive glow-up it received in Three Hopes is something I appreciated very much, and it simply had to be my choice for my favorite moveset in this game. It's not hard to understand why Holy Knight is so well regarded either. It's extremely mobile, and it has a lot of versatility depending on what spells and combat arts you equip. It's quite similar to Dark Knight, to the point that I'd call them more variations on one moveset rather than two distinct ones, but each of them shines in its own way. The obvious difference is in their charge attack. Dark Knight has a system where it lays down sigils with its combos that it can explode for extra damage, whereas Holy Knight's charge attack is an evolution of the Paladin charge attack, which can cover long distances very quickly and mow down weak enemies along the way to add to your KO count. I'd say that Dark Knight is better against monsters with its more stationary charge mechanic and greater variety of elemental effects. Although, as with the tome classes, you'll have to memorize which combo does which element. But for more general use, Holy Knight is the more effective of the two. It's a lot of fun to race around maps lighting up everything in your way, and I don't even mind that much that the self-healing luminance effect that Holy Knight borrows from Bishop doesn't see much practical use. It just looks cool, and that's the essence of Holy Knight, style and substance. That's going to do it for my top 5 favorite movesets. What are your favorite movesets in Three Hopes? Tell me about them in the comments, and be sure and like the video and subscribe to my channel for more Fire Emblem content. Thank you all for watching, and thanks especially to my patrons for your continued support of my content. While it's not going to be Fire Emblem related, I have another Patreon exclusive video planned in the next few weeks that I hope you guys will enjoy. Au revoir!